Hello, hi, welcome in and welcome back. My name is Dustin. This is a podcast called Boy Meets Therapy, but you already know that if you're here. If you're expecting another person today, there's not going to be one. It's going to be just me. So if you do not like the iterations where it's just me, now would be the time for you to click off or do whatever. I'll give you a moment. Okay. If you if you're still with me, God willing, we are going to talk about a topic that I think is really important that I keep seeing things about, but it's maybe not necessarily mentioned or talked about in this way. But I'm going to title it Emotional Starvation: Why You Keep Accepting the Bare Minimum. So I want to point out that emotional starvation is, I'm putting that in air quotes if you're watching, emotional starvation is not a clinical term. So that's not a term that you're going to look up and find like in a psychology book or whatever. It's just kind of a term that I am using now that I've heard used plenty. But anyway, if you're looking for it to be clinical, that's not a clinical term. But what we are going to do is we're going to combine a bunch of different theories to talk about it. Because one of the things that I've noticed that people have messaged me about, that I've seen in general, patterns that I've noticed within certain communities. I know I focus a lot on like the queer community, but I want to emphasize that this episode can be more generalizable than that. I think there are some like specializations specifically when it comes to like LGBTQ people, but this is very general. So this is for really anyone who identifies with the topic. So, what is the topic? So, I find that a lot of us, myself included, for sure, which is a lot of where the like inspiration for this came from, is accepting the bare minimum from people, especially when we know that we probably deserve more or we should have higher standards, but for some reason, like there's something maybe unconscious, maybe not, that's at play, that still pulls us towards people that we feel like do not give us kind of the attention that we deserve. And this is not just friends or partners, this is like bosses, this is a lot of different areas. Because I noticed one of the things in my life where I've noticed with unhealthy patterns with previous bosses. For example, I had a previous boss that this really, really, really comes up with when I think about it, at a job that I worked at for like 7 years. And I was there for a long time and I was miserable for most of it. I mean, I really enjoyed my coworkers and a lot of like the people that I saw day in and day out. But this is a restaurant job. But it was this weird thing where I wanted to leave the job, and I wanted to leave the job for like years, but there was always some kind of excuse. It's like, oh, well, the hours are good. Oh, well, this thing is good, or X, Y, and Z, or this excuse. And I would have friends be like, Dustin, I don't know why you feel like you can't find some of the benefits that you're talking about at another job. And so basically, from the outside looking in, they were kind of like, why are you staying at this job that you hate and complain about and bitch and moan about all the time? And I realized later on, after I've left the job, I haven't worked there for like 3 years, whatever. But I've noticed since I left the job, there were definitely some patterns at play with my boss and situations where I was maybe seeking approval or maybe seeking some kind of, whatever from him. But that's a whole other story. But I'm going to use that as just a quick example of where that kind of showed up for me. Of course, in relationships, of course, in with friends and stuff, this thing comes up a lot. So I want to ask you, like, have you ever caught yourself being grateful for the bare minimum? And I want to acknowledge that a lot of this is unconscious and a lot of this we don't realize is happening. So, if somebody says, have you ever been seen yourself being grateful for the bare minimum? Your initial response might be like, no, I've never seen that. I don't think that's happened. But, which is what my initial response would be. But when I think about my relationship that I used in the example of my former boss, I'm like, wow, Dustin, when you really think about that dynamic, you really were grateful for the absolute bare minimum, which is what he gave you, was the complete bare minimum when you needed more from like a relationship with an employer. And so I want you to think about relationships that echo maybe something like that, or a friendship where you have a friend that maybe you really like hanging out with them, you have a really, really great time, but they just seem to be too busy, or there's always something going on, or they can only kind of hang out with you when it's like convenient for them. A lot of these things we don't realize until we actually take a step back and look at it. Especially one of the things that the first things that happens we notice distressing things. Like we might feel sad about a friendship, right? We might be like, well, I really am sad because I want to spend more time with this friend X, Y, and Z. Or I'm mad at this friend because they didn't come to this thing with me, but they went to this other thing. So I would look for like strong emotional responses, because a lot of times strong emotional responses can be indicative of situations that I might be talking about here, or other situations too. So I am going to, and by the way, I am really, really proud of myself for using the word indicative, because that is such a good word. And if you have the opportunity next week, I would encourage you to use it. It's a nice little SAT word, and people will think you're smart. Even though there's no one else here, I just really enjoyed my use of that word. So, so I want you to ask yourself, have I ever caught myself being grateful for the bare minimum? What does that look like? A very quick text back, a half-hearted, half-ass apology, someone finally remembering to ask you how you are. It's a strange feeling, because there's parts of it that are relieving, of like, oh, there's my friend. I got a text from them. They didn't, completely ditch me or whatever. And there's also some shame there. That's like, I want to talk to this person, but I also am feeling some kind of way because the response that they gave me is like really half-assed, and I'm kind of picking up on it. You know that you deserve more, but there's a part of you that still says, at least it's something. This is the quiet voice and sound of emotional starvation. So I want to talk about what emotional starvation really is, why some of us mistake scarcity for love, and how to start rebuilding our capacity for real emotional nourishment in our relationships with other people. So, first of all, what is emotional starvation? Like, Dustin, what is that? Did you just make that up? Maybe. So, emotional starvation happens when consistent care and attention were never really reliable in our early life. So, we learn to survive on small bursts of affection, praise, or acknowledgement, and our nervous system has adapted itself to that pattern. So, as an adult, even minimal attention can feel like a feast. Yes, I wrote the word feast. I was really proud of that too. You mistake the relief of getting something for the feeling of being loved. So maybe you're in a relationship where your partner disappears for days. Then they send one affectionate message that makes you feel instantly calm again. Like, oh, okay. This can also happen if you don't hear from someone. Now, if someone's at work, they're busy. Okay. I'm not giving you this as an excuse to be like, well, he didn't text me for every 3 minutes. That's not what minutes. That's not what I'm saying. And you know that. And you know it. But, but, um, there's some communication there that's not as consistent as maybe it needs to be. So maybe you've stayed at a job where you're undervalued. Hello, that's me. But one small compliment from your boss keeps you going for months. Or maybe you grew up in a home where love only appeared when you were successful or helpful. So now you chase productivity instead of connection. These are all forms of emotional starvation. So you learn to find satisfaction in scarcity because that's what you were trained to expect. Again, a lot of these things are unconscious, so I would just note that. This isn't about weakness or low standards. This is more so about conditioning. Your brain and body learned that safety comes from taking whatever you can get. I want to say that again, and I want you to apply it in whichever way, whatever's coming to your head right now, that thing that's jumping up in your mind that's like, oh, whatever this thing, it's probably connected to that. Your brain and body learned that safety comes from taking whatever you can get. Let's go into it. So here's where the theory comes into play. And if you don't notice, I do a lot of things with my hands. If you're watching, my hands do a lot of stuff. And that's just gonna have to be a thing. If you don't like that, or it gives you a headache, I would switch to the audio only version if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're on YouTube, you're fucked. So okay. So attachment theory. This is where the psychological theory comes in, and we get to play with the research, we get to play with the data, and we get to play with the psychology. So attachment theory, we've talked about plenty of times before. So attachment theory can help explain where this pattern begins. When a caregiver is consistently responsive, a child develops what we call secure attachment. This is a belief that love is dependable and safe. When care is inconsistent or withdrawn, the child develops what's called an insecure attachment. This is a belief that love must be earned or chased. So, as adults, we often replay these attachment templates. You might find yourself drawn to emotionally unavailable people because their distance feels familiar. Again, I'm going to say this 6 fucking times in this episode. A lot of this is unconscious. A lot of this you don't notice until you pay attention to the pattern. So you might find yourself drawn to emotionally unavailable people because their distance feels familiar. Or you might be someone who pulls away when things get too intimate because closeness feels unsafe. Think about that. If something's getting too intimate and you pull away, that doesn't always look like as cut and dry as it does. Sometimes it looks like the ick. Okay. And I'm just going to take a quick 2-second side note into the ick. So we all know what the ick is. If you don't know, the ick is the thing that happens when you like someone or you're attracted to someone and they do that one thing that just, you're like, it's done. It's over. I can never be attracted to them again. I want you to pay attention to the ick the next time that it happens to you. What is the ick? What is it? Is it a sign of vulnerability? Is it attached to anything deeper? What is the ick? Pay attention to the ick, because once you learn your icks, I think there are a lot of things that are connected to it. And I didn't make that up. That comes from my own therapy of me dating someone who is emotionally healthy, emotionally stable. They show up. I'm attracted to them. They have the things that I like in a partner, but they do that one thing. And then I have my therapist say, Dustin, why is it that whenever you've described to me your ideal partner, this person fits 8 out of whatever 10 of those categories? We're just saying whatever. But then they chew their food too fucking loud, and now you're not into them anymore. Think about the ick, because what is the ick protecting you from? So, emotional starvation starts here. This is when your body learns that inconsistency is normal and predictable care feels foreign. I have another example really quick. So a lot of times some people mistake neediness. They get the ick with neediness, or they have a partner who they perceive to be needy. This is especially true of my queer people that are listening. Of my queer people that are listening. We find someone that we're like, oh, they're just too needy. They're just like too available. What the fuck does that mean? Now, I think we know the difference between someone who's coming on a little too strong versus someone who's emotionally available. Okay? Because a lot of times neediness is emotional availability. No, wait. Let me rephrase that. Hold on. Don't cut it out, Dustin. Just keep going. Not neediness in the aspect of, I need you to be here. Where are you? Why aren't you there for me? Is not availability. What I'm talking about is someone who's present and just showing up for you, and you're just like, and you're unconsciously pushing them away because you don't know how to deal with that. Let's clearly differentiate those two things. I might have to edit that one part out so that y'all don't get any bad and any crooked ideas, but I'll probably leave it in. So I want to talk about another theory, intermittent reinforcement. So this is from Skinner. I'm pretty sure this is B.F. Skinner. When I put this together, hold on. Let me, in real time, I am checking. Yep, B.F. Skinner. Okay, because I looked at this. 1953, that has to be B.F. Skinner. So when I was looking at this research here, I just kept seeing Skinner. And so when I cited it, and now that I'm reading it back, actually, I should have read this. I should have had this realization off camera, but I'm realizing B.F. Skinner is, if you did a degree in psychology or intro to psychology or whatever, B.F. Skinner is like one of the foundational people. So 1953, yeah. So intermittent reinforcement, Skinner and Fisher. So another piece of this pattern comes from intermittent reinforcement. This is a concept from behavioral psychology. So this means that rewards or affection are given unpredictably. Sometimes you receive warmth or praise, other times you are ignored. That unpredictability actually strengthens attachment. It's the same principle behind gambling. You never know when the next win will come, so you stay invested. So I want to say something attached to this. So to my queer people who you got to stop, Dustin. Just stop. Just stop doing it. I can't. So, one of the things that I want to say is the connection to this specifically and gay men. So, if you're not a gay man, I'm sorry. Give me 2 seconds. Fast forward 3 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever. So, think about gambling and hookup culture. Is there anything when I say that to you that is coming up with the similarities between gambling and hookup culture? Could it be that sometimes you go, and I'm not, don't come for me saying I'm saying hookup culture is bad. Don't do that. Don't do it. Honestly, don't do it. So what I'm saying is a lot of times when we are seeking external validation through hookup culture, we follow the same principle as gambling. We may find someone that we want to hook up with or that we want to hang out with or whatever that we have a good time with. A lot of times we don't, but it only takes the one and maybe 4 or 5 times to keep us invested that, okay, it's going to happen again at some point. Think about that. So the unpredictability actually strengthens the attachment. So yeah, this is the same principle behind gambling, which is it's not a consistent reward, it's an unpredictable reward. In relationships, it might look like a partner who pulls away for weeks, then comes back with attention or affection right when you start to detach. As in, right when you start to detach and become uninterested, they all of a sudden push really deep into you again. Don't take that out of context. Grow up. Grow up. Anyway, so your nervous system becomes addicted to the high of being chosen again after neglect. The small reward feels powerful because it temporarily relieves the deprivation underneath. Deprivation, that's another big word. So part 4, trauma and the nervous system. So trauma research shows that long-term emotional deprivation changes how the body regulates safety. When your baseline is scarcity, abundance can feel threatening. But that's tying back into the thing that I said before. When you find someone who is in fact emotionally available and shows up for you, and it feels threatening to you, or it feels uncomfortable, or it feels weird. So Peter Levine describes this as a dysregulated nervous system. This is one that confuses calm with danger because calm was never safe. So a lot of times when you see people that are repeating familiar patterns, right? Like someone grows up in a chaotic household and they seem to be in chaotic relationships. Or you have that one friend, or you are this friend where you're consistently something is happening. A lot of people talk about it as like drama, whatever. I don't really know exactly. There's a lot of relationships to that word drama, but I want to say it's if there's really no stability. And even though we think we want calmness and stability, it feels threatening. I want to acknowledge boredom as well. Because a lot of times when people say, I'm bored with this person, that there can be validity to that you're bored with them. Or could it be an indicator that you are used to dysregulated nervous system and all of a sudden things are calm and it feels weird to you. So you're interpreting it as boredom and then distressing feelings follow that of, I got to get out of here. I got to do this. I'm missing out on this, blah, 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 blah. Think about the relationship between those things. Okay. And that's kind of the dynamic of calm, not feeling safe. Because some people might say, calm, not feeling safe. What does that even mean? Rewind and you'll figure it out. So Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, this is a really popular one, polyvagal theory, expands on this. It shows how our nervous system stays in states of hypervigilance when connection feels unpredictable. So when someone shows you steady care, you might feel uneasy or even suspicious of them. You might wonder, why are they being so nice to me? What do they want? As if there's some kind of ulterior motive. Or you might lose interest altogether because consistency feels unfamiliar. Your body is not broken if this is happening, okay? And if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I relate with a lot of that stuff. Your body's not broken. It's doing what it learned to do to protect you from the shock of disappointment. So this is when I'm going to ease into my part 5. So this is the role of self-worth conditioning. People who grow up in emotionally neglectful environments often internalize the belief that their needs are too much. Over time, you stop asking for nourishment because it feels like a burden to others, i.e., people that feel really uncomfortable asking for help, This is me, by the way, all 120,000%. This is me. People that they might really need support from their friends, but they're like, I don't want to bother them, blah, blah, blah. Pay attention to that. You shrink your expectations to avoid being let down. You convince yourself that being low maintenance is a virtue. You take pride in not needing much. But underneath that pride, what's underneath that? It's fear. The fear that if you ask for what you really need, it will confirm that nobody is capable of meeting it. This is emotional starvation at its core. You learn to feel grateful for crumbs because the pain of asking and not receiving feels worse than settling for less. Part 6. Recognizing emotional starvation in adulthood. Let's talk about some examples. I'm not going to go off the rails here. I wrote examples down. Normally I go off the rails and I got on a tangent about some example. We're not going to do that. So, emotional starvation can show up in subtle and familiar ways. This is feeling undeserving when someone offers genuine affection or care. This is mistaking inconsistency for passion or spark. I'm going to repeat that one again. Mistaking inconsistency for passion or a spark. Feeling bored by stability or people who treat you well. Staying in relationships or friendships that only meet you halfway. Feeling guilt or shame when you assert a need. Calling bare minimum communication effort. So here's another example. Maybe you're dating someone who only compliments you when they want something, but you still find yourself replaying their words over and over because it's the only affection you get from that partner. Or you have a friend who never initiates plans, yet every time they finally text you, it feels like proof that they care. Or you've learned to downplay your needs in therapy or relationships because others have it worse. I want to grab you. If you can't see me on the screen, I want to grab you and shake your head because this is a huge one. Huge. This is people who downplay their needs in therapy or relationships because others have it worse. I had a client in my internship. I'm not going to give anything away about this client because that would be obviously crazy and unethical. But there were several sessions we had where I had to tell this client to stop trying to stop over empathizing with everybody else's perspective because they were unable to identify where things could be difficult for them because they were consistently comparing it to other people experience this, other people have it worse, but this person experienced that. And we had to be like, hold on. Let's take this empathetic part of you that we love and that we need and that makes you you and just put it to the side for a second and think about your experience and how it impacted you. So that's a big one. Pay attention to others have it worse. That doesn't mean that you have a blanket excuse to bitch about everything. This is honestly me talking to myself. That you have a blanket excuse to bitch about everything because you're all of a sudden, like focusing on what's distressing to you. But I'm just saying, let's be logical here. So if these sound familiar, again, you're not broken. You've adapted to survive an environment that gave you too little for too long. And it's just a little too late. Shout out JoJo. She was like 13 when that came out. And I remember that was 2006. And that song was a bop. And it is still a bop. And she has since re-recorded it. And good for her. We love you, JoJo. Now it's time to teach your system that abundance is safe. So, Dustin, you've said a lot of stuff. A lot of this stuff sounds like my problem. Dustin, you can't talk about the problem and then not offer any kind of potential solution. So, part 7, healing from emotional starvation. I also recognize that I don't have to say part 7. Like that's in my notes for me. And I keep saying it. Then I'm like, Dustin, this isn't a book. Anyway, so healing from emotional starvation. So you have to relearn what enough feels like. Some of us have to learn what enough feels like. That's a little important differentiation. So I would start by noticing what genuine consistency looks like, even in small ways. What does that look like? A friend who texts or checks in on you regularly. A coworker who checks in on you regularly. A partner who listens to you without judgment. At first, this might even feel dull or uncomfortable. That's normal. If you're coming from the environments and kind of you're experiencing a lot of the things that I just previously described, the uncomfortability is going to be normal. But you know what? You're going to survive it, I promise you. Safety often feels boring when you're used to chaos. So you also have to build tolerance for nourishment. So healing, I don't like that word, healing. It's important, but I don't know. I think it's overused. Healing means teaching your body that safety can coexist with abundance. So when care feels overwhelming, pause and breathe. Someone's checking in on you a lot. What's going on here? You have a partner who's like, tell me what's wrong. Tell me what's wrong. Hold on. Pause and breathe. Notice your urge to pull away. Remind yourself that calmness is not emptiness. That's a huge one I want you to pay attention to. When you feel the urge to pull away from something, or you're feeling uncomfortable from something, notice the urge to pull away and what is the motivation behind that urge. Why am I pulling away? What is this urge pulling me from? Could it be vulnerability? Could it be tolerance for nourishment? What could it be? So you have to reparent the part that settles sometimes. So you might ask yourself, what would enough look like for the version of me that stopped asking? Start meeting that need directly through community. You could do it through therapy, acts of self-care that show consistency, because I think self-care within ourselves is just as important as self-care with other people. So a lot of times we have to redefine love as well. Love isn't proven through suffering or uncertainty, okay? And a lot of us mistake love for passion. Passion's a word I used earlier. Passion can be exciting, and it is exhilarating, and it is powerful. But be careful, because a lot of times love is patient and kind. Is that biblical? If it's biblical, then I'm going to take it. If not, I don't know. I don't remember who said it. Love isn't proven through suffering or uncertainty, or is not these extreme ups and downs that we feel. It's not about being chosen after being ignored. Real love is steady, it's curious, and it is reliable. It is not about intensity. It is about trust. So I would almost identify love as an unconditional acceptance and knowing for sure that someone is going to be your friend or someone's going to be there for you. I think that's a big indicator there. It's like, we all have those people in our lives that we talk about. We usually refer to them as best friends, right? We say things like, I could tell them anything and I know that it would be okay. That's what love is, baby. That's what love is. I should write a country song. That is what love is. Love is being able to talk to someone and knowing, going into that conversation, that you're not going to say anything that is going to have them push away from you. So this is my notes say part 8. I already said it. So reflection and integration. Integration is a big thing I talk about all the time. You might not recognize fullness right away. After years of emotional scarcity, enough will feel excessive at first. But as safety grows, I think you'll be able to see that steadiness is not a threat. It's actually freedom in your relationships. Healing from emotional starvation means expanding your capacity to receive care. It's learning that you never had to earn the basics of love. Ask yourself these questions. When was the last time I felt truly nourished? When does enough, oh my God, I fucked up. What does enough feel like in my body? What would it mean to stop settling for the bare minimum? When you stop starving, you stop mistaking crumbs for care. You see my pun there? Thank you. That's where real connection begins. So I want you to think about a couple of the things that we've talked about here. I've mentioned a couple of theories. I've mentioned a couple of things. And just to round it out with my own personal example, because the personal example that I used was with my former boss, right? So I think one of the things that I learned from that relationship after like going through my own therapy mainly, you can study therapy. I did a psychology undergrad degree and then I did the master's degree in counseling. And I think you can study a lot of stuff. And I really love studying it. I love the theory and I love the kind of like textbook version of it a lot of times. But really where you see it is in your own therapy. Like really where you see it is when you have another person say back to you, and I'm not giving you an ad for therapy, because friends can do this for you too. Like friends can also repeat things back to you who are really insightful, or friends that notice patterns and blah, 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 blah. I think you really have to kind of go through your own journey of growth through it. And I think one of the things that I noticed in my own journey, again, going back to the example with my former boss, was that relationship with my former boss was really, really similar to a relationship previously that I had had with I'm going to say it, parent. And that was a big one for me. And because there was this sense of rebellion that I had, and like, I would be like, fuck this, fuck my boss, like he's such a motherfucker. And I would rebel against him. But then there would be this small validation, or this little sense of him saying, okay, it was just, it's a whole thing going back and forth. And I noticed the similarity of that pattern. So one of the things that I look for when I'm working for people now, which obviously I've had bosses or people that have managed me since then, is I really pay attention to when I'm getting that urge, like to rebel, which is the childlike urge. I'm paying attention to it. And I'm saying, whoa, why is this coming up? Why is this part like jumping into the driver's seat? And why does this part feel so young? So I just pay attention to that when you start to feel that in these relationships, and especially pushes and pulls in relationships. That's a big thing to pay attention to. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, what healing looks like from that former relationship is when I am working in a job now, if I have a boss or someone who's managing me that I'm working with that's pretty consistently pulling up these feelings, I have to approach that in a different way. So what it might look like for me now is saying, hey, I'm sensing that this is going on in our like professional relationship. I don't work well under this kind of thing. Or if it gets bad enough, recognizing this is not the environment for me to work in. And that's really tough sometimes, especially when you've like had difficulty finding a job, or, the job has certain pay or benefits that you need. Like there's a lot of economic things that go into it. But sometimes if it gets bad enough, it's like, you know what? I cannot relive this again. So for me, when I go into a work environment, that's just something I pay attention to. And I just use my example of work. That could be plenty of other relationships. And I have plenty of other relationships where that has been a thing too, where I've had friends where I've had to be like, hey, I feel really like insecure in our relationship, and that I don't really know where you stand. And I feel like when we're actively hanging out, we have so much fun and there's so much love there. But when we're not, there's just this huge disconnect. And I just can't really tolerate the push and pull of that. So a lot of times when you talk to people about how you're feeling about it, they're like, oh my gosh, well, you might be surprised by them saying, I actually feel the same way, especially with a friend or a partner or something, of them saying, I actually feel similarly. I'm glad that you brought that up. And then there's a deep conversation there. Or maybe they'll be dismissive of you, and that will be indicative of the kind of person that they are, or the kind of relationship that they are able to offer you, which might not be a relationship that you find fulfilling. And you might need to like distance yourself from that. I'm so proud of myself for like going full circle using the word indicative again. So I want to thank you for joining me. I could talk about this for a long time, about like different relationships and different examples. Maybe that's something that I could do in the future, of just like different types of patterns. And I always like to use myself as an example, because no one can say, Dustin, that's not your experience. Like if I used another example for someone else, they might be able to be like, well, you don't know how they felt. And that's true. But when I use my own experience in these kind of like scenarios, I can say, I can speak more confidently about it, which is why I like to use my own experience. So with that, I'm going to bid you adieu. I'm going to thank you for joining me. And I want to encourage you to think about like some of the things that I talked about. I also want to say one more thing. I write a blog post about every single episode that I do. It's on my website. I have a website called boymeetstherapy.com. There's also, I have like a link tree. It's linked there as well, like in my bios and stuff, I think. But if you were ever thinking about a topic that I've talked about, or an interview that I did with somebody, I actually compile. It takes me a lot of fucking time to do this. I want to acknowledge that. And also some bitterness in my voice that doesn't have to be there, because Dustin, you don't have to write it. No one's telling you to. So that anger that I just directed towards whatever, is really unwarranted. But, and I'm not angry, actually, I enjoy it. So I write a blog post about every single topic that I cover. And a lot of times the blog post has my citations, my sources cited. I can't fucking talk. You notice that? So my sources are cited, and you can actually refer to them if you are interested in some of the theories that I'm talking about or whatever. But if you're like, I don't want to listen to the podcast episode again, which I completely understand, or you want something more direct and to the point because I digress like a motherfucker. I've been saying the F word a lot this episode, and I just want to acknowledge that, and I'll rein it back. But so my blog posts have a very detailed and more to the point description of the theory and of the topic. So honestly, sometimes if you see an episode that you're interested in and you're like, I'm interested in it, but he's probably going to like blah, blah, blah for a long time, you can go and read the blog post and see if you would be interested in actually even reading it or watching the episode or whatever. So I want to say that there's also tons of resources on the website too, like mental health resources. Yeah, there's also links from like the clinicians I've interviewed. Like, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff on there. There's an about me. It's also a beautiful shade of blue, which I love, the cover art blue. So yeah, I'm going to leave you with that because there's nothing else to talk about and you've made it to the end. So thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, bless your heart, because I haven't even made it this far. I'm not here anymore. Okay, bye.